Get it.
All right, we're in 2 Kings chapter number 12. And, we've seen numerous things going on and with the different kings. And I was going to make a copy of this list of the kings of Israel and Judah, and I forgot to make the copies, but I'm going to make a copy and try to bring everybody one next week, and you can see who all were considered to be good kings, and because more of them were considered evil or bad than there were good. Between the two kingdoms, between Judah and Israel, the northern kingdom, there were 39 kings. There were 19 kings of Israel and 20 kings of Judah. All 19 of Israel did things that were evil in the sight of God. They didn't have not one king that followed the ways of the Lord. And with Judah, they only had about 8 out of 20. So, it's sad. All God asked was for them to follow His commands, statutes, and, He would bless them. And, they wouldn't do that. But, it's really just about the same way today. People don't want to follow God. They don't want anything to do with God until they're in trouble. And then they want to jump on that bandwagon and God gets them out of trouble and they jump off of that wagon again. And it's sad. But last week, we saw that Joash, or, his name is used 2 different ways in Scripture. In some Scriptures it calls him Jehoash, and in other Scriptures it just calls him Joash. But he was 7 years old. We read about this 2 weeks ago, not last week, but 2 weeks ago. He became king at 7 years old. So not a lot he could do at 7 years old, but he was the new king. And now, he's getting on up in a little bit of age, and he's going to be king for 40 years. So he started off at 7 years old, and he's going to be done at 47. But we're going to begin chapter 12, verse 1. In the 7th year of Jehu, Jehoash began to reign, and 40 years reigned he in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Zibiah of Beersheba. And, a lot of times with these young boys, they would list the mother's names because the mothers really had more to do with the raising and teaching of the children than did the fathers. And, it's just like in the New Testament, even with Timothy, when Paul shared with him that about, how he had come to learn about Jesus Christ and to be taught about having faith in Jesus Christ, Paul shared with him that he had gotten these things from his grandmother and his mother. So it didn't mention anything about his father. So, I know back years ago when, pretty much, I wouldn't say all families, but most families, the mothers stayed home and kept the kids and raised the kids while the daddies went out and worked for the household. So, it was a lot of the mothers teaching the children and raising them. So, but that's why the mother is listed here, because she had a lot to do with the raising of Joash. And Jehoash did that which was right in the sight of the Lord all his days, wherein Jehoiada the priest instructed him. Now, and I like that because, like I shared, there were only about 8 kings in Judah that did that was right in the eyes of the Lord. out of 20. That's not too good of a record for the kings, for just 8 of them out of 20. But, the previous kings before Joash, they were doing things that were evil in the sight of the Lord. And now with Joash or Jehoash coming to reign and him doing that was right in the sight of the Lord, it's really more like they're having a revival in the kingdom of Judah, because it was getting them back to serving God and doing away with the things that were contrary to God, but they still had some things here that they weren't quite all of them following the Lord. And it's even in our land today. We can have a revival and have a good revival, but you know what? Not everybody is going to come attend a revival. Not everybody is going to get revived in the Lord. And that's what we see in verse 3. Because he says, but the high places were not taken away. The people still sacrificed and burnt incense in the high places, which was, contrary to what God wanted them to do. God was not pleased with that, but there was some that continued that practice, even though Joash was beginning to get everybody back, trying to get everybody back to serving God. And I'd love to see that in our country today. Getting people back to serving God. Getting people's minds and hearts back on the Lord instead of everything else. But even with that, if we were to have a revival that we just sweep across our land, everybody's not going to follow that. And it's sad, but everybody's not. There'd still be those out there that would be hard-headed and going after whatever they wanted. And that's what we had here in the days of Jehoash or Joash. You're going to hear me use either name because it's the same person. And Jehoash said to the priests, all the money of the dedicated things that is brought into the house of the Lord, even the money of every one that passeth the account, the money that every man is set at, and all the money that cometh into any man's heart to bring into the house of the Lord. So, they did give offerings of money. And, some had maybe a set amount of what they were given whenever they would give, whether it was every week, once a month, or whatever it was. They had an amount that they were given. And, in the Old Testament, there's several places that shares that, a tithe was a tenth of what they had, a tenth of what they made. And, I don't find in the New Testament where it shares exactly what to give, but, that's what God asked of the people in the Old Testament. Our God doesn't change. So I would say that a tenth would still be a good figure to go with. But, if we'll give what God places on our heart, we'll be given exactly what God would have us to give. And most of the time, if you get down and figure it up, it'd probably be a tenth or even more. So, but, God knows what is needed for His kingdom, for His service. For us to be able to have this building, for people to come, God knows what's needed. And we've always had it. We've never come up short. So with all the money that was taken up, he said, let the priest take it to them, every man of his acquaintance, and let them repair the breaches of the house, wheresoever any breach shall be found. So any places in the house of God that needed repairing, that's what, Joash, this is what needs to be done with this money. A portion of this money needs to be used to keep up the house of the Lord. And, I was gonna look these scriptures up, and I forgot that, and I apologize, but there's scriptures in the Old Testament where God shared with his people that they were sitting in their houses, making sure their house was built and nice and everything taken care of it, while his house was desolate. His house was broken down. And God wanted them to stop that, because what was more important was to have a place to worship. And, just like our building here, God blessed us with this building, and I know the building is not the church. The church is all of us that comes into this building, but God blessed us with this building to be able to worship in. And one of the responsibilities we have as a Christian and as a part of this church is to do our best to take care of this building. I know if you'll look, there's some leaks around about, and Brother Laverne, there's no telling how many times he's been up on the roof trying to fix some of those, trying to find so we could patch it, do whatever we needed to get it to stop leaking. And that's what we need to do. I'm glad he'll get up there, because I'll stand on the dirt and hand you anything you want. I'm just not getting up on top of the building. I don't like that. The last time I got up on top of a house, me and Josh, when we lived over on Zimmerman Street, me and him would get up there. We had a bunch of pine trees in the yard. We'd get up there and we'd get the straw off. And the last time I got on top of my roof there, me and him got done, and we got back around to the ladder, and I don't know what happened. I just had to sit down. I was like, Lord have mercy. I'm going to have to call the fire department to come get me down off the roof. And I told Josh. Josh says, Daddy, what's wrong? I said, nothing. I said, just go on down. I'll be down directly. And I finally got on the ladder and got down, and I've not been on top of a house since. I just couldn't. I don't know what happened. But God blessed us with this, and we need to do our best to take care of it. Whether it's cleaning toilets, vacuuming the floor, patching the roof, whatever it is. That's what we need to do. Changing filters to keep the air conditions going, and whatever we need to do, that's what we need to do to keep this building to the best that it can be. And I've always been told that when you have visitors come to your church, a lot of times the first thing they look at is the bathrooms. They'll see if you got clean bathrooms, and they'll know, if you're doing your best to keep up that building. A lot of times if it's nasty bathrooms, they may not come back. So, but it's our responsibility, and that's what Joash was telling the priest, to take this money and make sure that the house of God was repaired. Make sure that anything that was wrong with it was taken care of. But he goes on to share. He says, but it was so that in the 23rd year of King Jehoash, the priest had not repaired the breaches of the house, even though he had shared that with them. Take this money and take care of the house. But, they were taking this money and doing everything else with it, instead of taking care of the house of God. And sometimes, even in churches today, things like that happen. And instead of making sure things are done, folks will want to spend it on everything else other than really what is really necessary. There's other things that's necessary with a church. And, if you know somebody without a doubt is in need, that's what I liked about Miss Betty Dupree when she did the Berrien County Health Advocates, whatever the name of it was. She would check them out. She would make sure. She would call me, and she'd say, Brother Clarence, these people need help. I know without a doubt. And the other time she'd call me and said, these people are probably going to try to get in contact with you. She said, but I'm going to tell you right now, they don't need your help. So but she would thoroughly check them out. But sometimes folks will just spend money on anything and everything instead of what it should be. You know, Jehoash had told them, you know, the house of God needs repairs. Take that money and fix it. But in the 23rd year of Jehoash, they had not done anything, nothing, other than spend money. Then King Jehoash called Jehoiada the priest and the other priests and said unto them, Why repair ye not the breaches of the house? Why are you not repairing the broken down parts of the house? Now therefore receive no more money of your acquaintance, but deliver it for the breaches of this house. So now, you know, he's, you know, as king, he's commanding them, you know, he's giving them an order. You don't spend any money other than for repairing the house of God. Don't do anything else with it. Don't go down here and buy a new carpet when you need a new roof. Don't go down here and buy new refrigerators and stoves when the ones you got's okay, and you know part of your building needs replacing. You know, but you know he's laying down the law to them. You know, you don't spend any money other than for fixing this building. And that's it. So, and the priest consented to receive no more money of the people, neither to repair the breaches of the house. So, you know, they're kind of caught between a rock and a hard place, the priests are. You know, they've wasted a lot of money. And, you know, they don't have the money to fix the house. So, but Jehoiada, the priest, took a chest and bore a hole in the lid of it and set it beside the altar on the right side as one cometh into the house of the Lord. And the priest that kept the door put therein all the money that was brought into the house of the Lord. In other words, they had a lock box up here with a little slot in the top. They could drop their money in there. And probably only one person, the high priest, probably the only one, Jehoiada, he's the only one that had a key to it. So that everybody couldn't get all their hands on the money. That's, you know, I'm thankful that we have a church clerk and we don't have but one. Everybody in the house don't, you know, get their hands into the money and, hey, let's spend it here, there, and everywhere. You know, Sister Lynn takes care of paying bills, light bill, whatever needs to be paid. And I'm thankful. I'm thankful for the job that she does. And, you know, the records that she keeps and that we share at our conferences. You know, it's laid out there, itemized, where everything's been spent.
And my program, by the way, it's crashes while we have had a budget reports and trying to figure out how to restore it.
Okay.
Just
But, you know, and I'm thankful for I'm thankful we don't have everybody with their hands in the money. You know, we'd come up short.
You'd have too many sticky fingers.
More than likely. Because now I have heard of churches where even folks that were taking up the taking up the offering, you know, some of that was going south.
I don't know how people live with themselves.
You know, I don't either, but I know of a church that had this happen. You know, and instead of calling this person out and embarrassing them, which I don't know what needed, but they just didn't call on that person to help take up the offering anymore. You know, but you know it's sad. And it's like Sister Lynn said, I don't know how you live with yourself doing that. I mean, that's when you're taking up that offering, that's God's money, which is every penny we've got's God's. But that we give to Him in an offering, we're giving that as an offering to God. It's our tithe. So, I'd hate to know that I went in there to count some money and stuck it in my, oh, here's $100 bill, will somebody miss it? But Lord have mercy. I mean, that'd be bad. So, Jehoiada fixed the box. Cut a slot in the top. Everybody drop your money in this box. You put your offering in there. And there's churches, and we actually, when we were trying to raise money and paying for everything, as we were trying to raise as much money as we could, we had a box that sat out here on the table that had a slot in the top. It's several years ago, where if you wanted to give something towards the building fund, just drop it in that slot. It had a lock on it, and that money that was put in that went to nothing but the building fund. So, and I've seen a lot of churches do that when they were going to do some building or repairs or whatever. And I've seen some of them have a little box built in the shape of a church. And it would have a slot in the top, and they'd drop, have it out on the table when you're going out. If you want to give something towards the repairs of the building or whatever, drop it in that box. And that's similar to what they're doing here. See how, some things today goes right back to Scripture. Because this is what they were doing, because they weren't taking care of God's house. They were not using the money for what it was there for. So, but, he cut a hole in the top of the lid, locked it. Here, put the money in here. And it was so, when they saw that there was much money in the chest, that the king's scribe or secretary and the high priest came up, and they put up in bags and told the money that was found in the house of the Lord. So in other words, they counted it, and they let the people know what was taken up. And that's, really every church that I'd ever been a part of, except the Nashville Mission, when you took up an offering, people knew what you took up. But now, I know and I loved the mission, don't get me wrong, I enjoyed pastoring there, but, really the church never knew what was taken up. So I don't really know who knew what was taken up. I was the pastor there, and I didn't know what was taken up. But when this box would get full, the king's secretary and the high priest, so there was two of them, so one could kind of watch the other, I guess. I don't know what the deal, they would empty that box and count the money, and hey, you know what, we got $100 or we got $10,000 or whatever. And then, everybody would know what was taken up. And he says, and they gave the money, being told, into the hands of them that did the work, that had the oversight of the house of the Lord, and they laid it out to the carpenters and builders that wrought upon the house of the Lord. So they took this money, they counted it, they let everybody know what was taken up, and then they paid the carpenters, all the folks that were working on the building, whatever needed to be done, they paid them people. So it went straight from the high priest and the secretary right to the workers that were repairing the house. So everybody's hands wasn't in the money, so that it wouldn't be, going for this or going for that, or hey, we don't like this brown carpet, let's get some green carpet. I know this carpet is, 12 years old or so, I guess. And, when we put this carpet down, I kept telling everybody, you can use bleach on this carpet. No, you can't. But I wouldn't want to just come pour a hole, just fill it up with bleach in here, but you can put bleach on this carpet and it won't take the color out of it. You know, for cleaning purposes. So, you know, but it still serves the purpose. I know there's a few runs here and there, but it don't bother me. Does it bother anybody else? Lynn?
Not much to replace the carpet, right?
Let's wait on replacing the carpet.
Ours at home is 40 years old.
United about that too.
I would let the rest of my house have that wood floor and stuff like we put down in my living room. I want the rest of my house with that instead of the carpet. I'm tired of carpet. But, you know, they paid the people who needed to be paid that were taking care of the building. Helped them pay their expenses for buying whatever lumber, whatever they needed to repair. So, and, you know, they gave it to all these folks and to the masons and hewers of stone and to buy timber and hewed stones to repair the breaches of the house of the Lord and for all that was laid out for the house to repair. So anything that needed to be repaired, they were taking this money that was put in this box. The high priest and the secretary would count it, and they would pay the people that needed to be paid. You know, and that's what needed to be done with it. Instead of letting God's house just run down, you know, I would hate, you know, I know at some point we're going to have to replace carpet or whatever, you know. I mean, it will eventually wear out. But I'd hate to know we're just changing carpet just to be changing carpet when, you know, there's other things that are more important that needed to be done to the building. Or even that, you know, somebody out there needs help. Somebody needs, you know, maybe some young'uns going hungry or whatever. I mean, I just hate to know that we were doing something that really wasn't necessary and not do the things that are necessary. So, because, you know, Jesus shared in the Gospels, in the book of Matthew, chapter 25, you know, the last part of chapter 25, Jesus shared there that if we feed the person that's hungry, if we give somebody something to drink that's thirsty, if we clothe them because they are naked, if whatever. Jesus said, if you do those things, he said, it's just like you're doing it to me. But he said, if you don't do those things, he said, then you haven't done it to me. You know, and that's sad. I want to do to the best of our ability to do that God would be pleased with, that would please our Savior. He's blessed us so tremendously right here in this little church. I mean, we've got a big building, but it's still a little church, and I thank God for it. You know, and he's blessed us so tremendously, and I think one of the main reasons he's blessed us so tremendously is we put him first. And we've done our best to keep what God would have us to do first. So, and that's, you know, that's what Jehoash wanted for them to do. So, you know, he's kind of got them on the right track here. Getting them back to doing what was needful to keep up the building. And he says, howbeit, there were not made for the house of the Lord bowls of silver, snuffers, basins, trumpets, any vessels of gold or vessels of silver of the money that was brought into the house of the Lord. So none of that money went to buying gold and silver plates and what have you, and you know, it all went towards what it was supposed to, making sure the building was taken care of first. Because, you know, if Brother Laverne didn't get up here and try to patch some of these leaks and this, we might be sitting here and have to have buckets everywhere, you know.
That's Snuffy Smith.
So, you know, we need to do our best to try to take care of it and try to patch it. And I know without a doubt, part of the problem is because of the way the building was put up. You know, because the concrete was not square. Because if you get outside and you look at this building on either side, you'll see that on one end, the overhang of the metal on the roof, one end it's this far hanging over, and on the other end it's about this far hanging over. But the concrete was not done correctly to where it would be square so that it would start off correctly. So, and then part of the problem was the tools they used to put the roof on. You know, because down on that end, on this side, there were about 12 or 14 sheets of metal that had to be replaced before we ever even thought of moving in this building. Because they had missed the beams up here with the screws, and then they'd taken some tar and put up there on top of that brand new tin. And Johnny Browning came and he said, "Y'all get that off of that building." And he brought 12, or it was either 12 or 14 new sheets of tin. He said, "I'll pay for them myself." And he brought it, and they put those new sheets up on the building. And because he said, this church doesn't need to start off with this sealant up on top of the building, and they ain't even moved in it yet. You know, so, but, you know, I know that's some of the problem. But I'm thankful that we have got people that don't mind getting up there and working, hunting, and looking, and searching for places that could be kind of patched so that we could stop some of this. So, you know, he goes on, he says, "But they gave that to the workmen and repaired therewith the house of the Lord." So all the money, instead of buying things, you know, silver and gold pans and pots and spoons, and, you know, they gave the money to the workmen that were working on the building, that was taking care of the building. So he says, "Moreover, they reckoned not with the men into whose hand they delivered the money to be bestowed on workmen, for they dealt faithfully." Now, so see, the high priest and the king's secretary, the scribe, they dealt faithfully with the money and with the people that was hired. Whoever it was, whether they needed hewed stone, whether they needed somebody cutting timber to make whatever they needed, wood-wise, whatever. They were faithful in taking care of that money and making sure it went for that purpose. The trespass money and sin money was brought into the house of the Lord. It was the priests. So, you know, and even back when we read through the statutes and the commandments and all the things that God had shared with Moses, and for Moses to share with the people, part of the money, part of the meat offerings that were brought into the temple belonged to the priest, because they had such a huge job. They didn't have time to get out and work and raise cows and crops, and so part of what was brought into the house of God as offerings went to the priests to feed them, and they might have a little money in their pocket, so they paid their preachers. So, and that's just, you know, the way God's had laid it out for these things to be done, for it to be taken care of. You know, they're working on these things, and then, you know, they have other problems. Still with Syria. And you think Syria would kind of have taken it easy on Israel and Judah because of what had taken place, just like with Elijah. When the army came and, or Elisha and his servant, servant was going berserk. We're going to be killed. Here's the Syrian army. And, Elisha just prayed God open his eyes that he might see. And God opened his eyes and he saw the army of God round about them. So he kind of calmed down. And, Elisha just prayed, and all of that army was blinded. They led them into Jerusalem, and the king wanted to kill them. And Elisha said, no, feed them and send them on their way. So they spared their army, but yet now they're going to come back, and we've already seen it two or three times, where they've come back against God's people, even after they were spared. They had mercy on them. So in verse 17, then Hazael, king of Syria, went up and fought against Gath and took it. Hazael set his face to go up to Jerusalem. So, he says, you know what, I've taken this portion of their land, we're going to take Jerusalem. We're going to overtake that city, and it's going to be ours. And Jehoash, king of Judah, took all the hallowed things that Jehoshaphat and Jehoram and Ahaziah, his fathers, kings of Judah, had dedicated, and his own hallowed things, and all the gold that was found in the treasures of the house of the Lord, and in the king's house, and sent it to Hazael, king of Syria, and he went away from Jerusalem. So he kind of paid him off to keep him from coming and taking Jerusalem. Hey, you know what? I'll give you this if you'll just leave us alone. Instead of calling up his army and going against them, hey, here's a pile of gold. And so Hazael and his army went away from Jerusalem. They withdrew. And the rest of the acts of Joash and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? So when we get to 1st and 2nd Chronicles, we're going to read more about the same man, Jehoash, or Joash, whichever one you want to call him. And his servants arose and made a conspiracy and slew Joash in the house of Millo, which goeth down to Selah. So, his very own servants killed him. He was a man that did his best to serve God. But, Satan does not like us serving God. He does not like us being here tonight, just reading a portion of God's Word and talking about it. Satan doesn't like that. It upsets him. He's upset with us, and he might try to bring things against us, hindrances and things to keep us from coming, but we don't ever need to give up. We just need to keep pushing forward. For Josachar, the son of Shimeath, and Jehozabad, the son of Shomer, his servant, smote him, and he died. And they buried him with his fathers in the city of David, and Amaziah, his son, reigned in his stead. And now, Amaziah is, if I'm not mistaken, he's going to do that was right in the eyes of God also, because he had had a good example before him. That's what we need to do our best to be. To anybody we come into contact, we need to be a good example of a good Christian, because we don't know what kind of effect it might have on their life. No doubt it's going to have a positive effect. So, he had saw what his father had done. His father was doing that was right in the eyes of the Lord, and he's going to do his best to do the same. Anybody have anything on any of these scriptures?
Okay, I'm lost in that last verse. Amaziah is the son to whom? Joash?
He's the son of